Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is David Brooks. I'm president of SRL Group, and today the webinar is entitled Why Some Doctors Get Lousy Reviews and What to Do About It. I'm joined here by Rachel Trobman, who is CEO of Ouchie. So first, I'll introduce what we'll cover today, and then we'll talk about, we'll introduce the speakers. So first, I'd like to cover what an online reputation is, and more importantly, why you should care. Second, we'd like to have you understand why do some doctors, especially those who treat chronic conditions, seem to have significantly worse online reviews. Third, what are the underlying causes for poor online reviews? And finally, how you can take action to mitigate the impact of poor online reviews. But first, a brief word from our sponsors. As I said before, I'm David Brooks and president of SRL Group. SRL stands for Stop Referral Leakage. We help physicians maximize word-of-mouth referrals by enhancing online reputation through innovative software to recruit patients to become advocates for your practice. And I'm joined today by Rachel Trobman, who is the CEO of Upside Health, the publishers of Ouchie.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me.
Great. And just by way of introduction, Ouchie is a very innovative new app that helps people who are hurting by providing them with tools to objectively track their and to celebrate their daily stories on their successful journey to wellness. We'll talk a little bit more about the connection between the two there, because it really is a very important role for applications like this in online reputation. So first, here's a sobering statistic. Everyone wants word of mouth, and everyone assumes that word of mouth is a slam dunk. But the reality is really far different. In this hyperconnected world, 3 out of 4 patients will Google a doctor before making an appointment. And here's another sobering fact. 37% of patients admitted that they will avoid a doctor with negative reviews, even if that doctor had a word-of-mouth endorsement from another happy patient. So let's first talk about a definition of terms, because your online reputation is a little bit more than the sum of your online reviews. Google's algorithm looks at your online reputation much the same way patients do. The sum total of everything about your practice online combined with everything everyone else says about you online. Factors that enhance your credibility are things like, do you have a detailed biographical profile on your website and elsewhere? Is your name, address, and phone number consistent with other authoritative online directory websites? Are you featured prominently on relevant healthcare websites? Do those profiles look good? Do you have a rich, full-featured, mobile-friendly, secure website? Are there other websites that link into that? And most importantly, is there a single authenticated and carefully curated Google My Business listing for each of your physical locations? So those are the positive factors that enhance credibility. Now let's look at some of the factors that Google and patients consider that undermine your credibility. Do your online profiles look outdated or neglected? Do your addresses conflict with each other, some old, some new? Do your phone numbers work? Is there any decent information about your medical credentials, accomplishments, and affiliations? What do you look like today, not 25 years ago in a photo? And of course, what are the sum total of your reviews? Are they bad? Are they old? Or are they just very sparse? So some doctors still say that they don't think reviews matter. And sadly, they're technically correct, yet they're absolutely wrong. Several studies back them up. They show that there's no correlation between online reviews and quality of care. And as some of you know, star ratings catch flack for administrative and billing issues, even staff attitude, nothing at all related to the quality of care or outcomes. That's the technically correct part. But here's why they're also absolutely wrong. The reality is, sadly, 75% of patients use online consumer ratings as the sole determinant of whether or not to see a physician. So even if you think reviews are bunk, your patients do not and will not get the care they need simply because they see a bad review. It gets worse. Review scores are highly skewed and have significant differences between medical specialties. Patients and doctors don't seem to understand this. So here's an example. A urologist with 4.6 stars is great, in the 80th percentile among her peers. A cardiothoracic surgeon with 4.6 stars, however, is merely average, in the 50th percentile of star ratings for surgeons. And don't get us even started on the bias that we've uncovered related to pain management docs. So this is a chart from a 2018 study in the Journal of Medical Internet Research, written by 4 researchers from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. It shows patient satisfaction scores by specialty. And what's surprising, there's a statistically significant difference in ratings based on medical specialty. Allied health professionals such as dental hygienists, dietitians, occupational and physical therapists have the highest mean overall satisfaction scores, 4.5 stars, followed closely by surgeons. But notice who's got the worst online reviews on this chart. Doctors that focus on chronic illnesses such as addiction, pain, and rheumatology. So if you go to this website that's prepared by the authors of that study, comparemydoc.com, you'll see the extent of the issue. Pain management docs have a mean score of 3.7 stars, which means roughly the 50th percentile of all physicians rated. And as I think most people would say, that, yeah, that's pretty bad. And this compared to family practice, where a 3.7 star rating would put the doctor in the 36th percentile. Or a cardiac surgeon, where a 3.7 star score would be in the 13th percentile. If you email me after this webinar, I'll share the link to the study. So there's definitely a star rating bias against some doctors, maybe even you. If you have lousy reviews, here's part of the reason. So next, let's discuss what you can do about it. Let's understand why people give lousy reviews. In market research, there's a concept called Net Promoter Score, or NPS, and it works something like this. Think about a customer satisfaction survey that asks, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you recommend Dr. Smith to friends and family? A detractor is someone who gives you a rating on a scale of 0 to 6. They're definitely not a fan. Someone passive scores you at a 7 or an 8. They like you, but not enough, and certainly not enough to go out of the way to do a favor for you, such as leave you a review. But a promoter is a fan, someone who scores you 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. A detractor at the low end of the scale, they give you a 1 out of 10, are those people that can be sufficiently agitated to seek a revenge with a bad online review. So what would make someone be this angry? It's probably more than a rude office person or a personality conflict. Think about the deeply held frustration from a chronically ill patient that doesn't feel they're making progress in their specific medical case. And you sort of get the idea about the mindset. So here's some examples of some really horrific reviews, specifically aimed at pain management doctors. These patients are highly motivated, angry people, and they're frustrated. Bad online reviews are a real occupational hazard for doctors that treat chronic diseases. A patient's frustration could drive them to lash out when they don't get the relief that they're seeking. So you got a bad review. Now what? Step 1, do not contact your lawyer. This strategy is almost never effective and will only lead you to making your lawyer a little bit wealthier. That's not to say you need to ignore it. First, you can and should dispute bad reviews if the review content violates the publisher's terms of use. Does the review contain personally identifiable health information, inappropriate or threatening language, or a host of other serious content concerns? Anecdotally, it is possible to get reviews taken down. For example, about 1 in 10 Yelp reviews are successfully challenged due to terms of use violations. But this should not be your first line of defense. For reviews that aren't obvious terms of use cases, you should respond quickly, within 24 hours if possible. Your tone should be non-confrontational and empathetic because hundreds of potential patients are reading this very review. Your lack of response, however, could be interpreted as a tacit admission of fault. But the best policy is to be proactive and make gathering of online reviews part of your normal business operations. Now, I know many doctors feel a bit squeamish about asking for reviews, but frankly, that's the wrong approach. You should be asking for feedback, not reviews. At checkout, train your staff to ask patients things like, could we have done anything more to serve you better today? Think about that question for a second. It can really diffuse a ticking time bomb, face-to-face versus online. If all goes well and the patient really is happy and pleased, then you should ask for a review. But ask something like, I'm glad you had a good experience. Would you mind leaving your feedback online? And here the key is to make it as easy as possible. It really helps if you have a tool that can make that happen immediately, right when the person agrees to do that. For example, we offer an SMS text messaging service that allows your desk clerk to literally just send a text message immediately at checkout. It's quick and easy, and they can leave a review on Google, Health Grades, or about 8 other consumer-focused websites. Many review monitoring services and Google My Business include ways to publish favorable reviews back onto your own website. And this really helps reinforce your growing and favorable online reputation. One of the biggest ways to generate more online reviews is to provide patients with a great experience. And if you're caring for patients with chronic diseases, one of the best ways to overcome the bias of your specialty is to have the patient be involved in self-reporting of their own progress and to give them a platform to regularly communicate with the doctor, a platform where their individual concerns are addressed. And so that's kind of where we bring us up to the application called Ouchie. I met Rachel at an investor conference about 2 months ago and was really taken by a lot of the things that they're doing with the product. And it really helps to satisfy some of those concerns about getting the patient involved, giving them a platform, giving them a voice in their own care, especially for chronic care. So Rachel, maybe let me turn the mic over to you, and maybe you can tell our audience a little bit more about Ouchie and how that ties into online reputation.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me again, David. One of the things that you touched upon is the qualitative versus the quantitative, right? So the open text that you see in Health Grades or Google listings, where patients can write whatever they want, and it's very, very little control when you're doing that. And the other way to combat that is through, one, telling your own story, and 2, showing objective data and the actual progress that your patients have seen in your care. Can we go to the next slide? David? Thank you. And so at Ouchie, we have created a mobile companion for pain management that empowers chronic pain patients and helps support their care providers, all while offering a reimbursable solution. And patient engagement is more than just a buzzword. It's actually opportunity to generate profit and change the way that you're seen by existing and future patients. So it's no longer, like I said, just a buzzword or a nice to have. And one of the ways that you can do that is through helping patients help themselves and then giving them the tools to help share the successes they've seen. Can you go to the next slide, David? And what we've seen is patients using our app have had that experience. So 71% of the users who used our app felt like they had better communication with their provider. Better communication equals more comfort. And when you're more comfortable communicating with your provider and sharing it, you're less likely to have to go to a third-party source to express your frustration. And 89% of users felt like they had more control over your pain. And the patient actually admitting to feeling like they have more control is a huge step in that's normally existing alongside of other emotional or behavioral health issues. And so with the sense of control comes a sense of or a lack of need to go elsewhere. Next slide. One of the things that you can do to improve the patient experience is, like I said, give patients the tools to self-manage. So in Ouchie, we allow patients to track how they're doing, everything from pain level, mood, sleep, functional abilities, challenges, and then set goals for themselves. As they move toward their journey, these goals are everything from spend more time with my family, spend more time with, go back to work, be able to climb the steps, wash myself. Really, depending on their functional challenges when they begin, the functional accomplishments are very broad. Then they can see the successes they found in the everyday. And through our rewards-based system, as they make positive steps towards their accomplishments, they actually get physical rewards. So we send out gift cards, wellness packs, things to let them know that they're every part of the journey. And the best part about you as a provider is you don't have to do anything to make that happen. But because they were introduced to the platform through your office, they automatically creates a sense of goodwill and understanding. The patients also get access to a supportive community. And chronic pain patients or chronic patients, or chronic disease patients across the board often experience a great deal of isolation, social frustration, and that increased burden on the provider that they always can't care to. And then lastly, we provide interactive and integrative wellness content that doesn't have to fall on you as a practice, but allows you to expand your care offerings without you having to take on the infrastructure of in-person support groups, meditation, yoga, all of those things that are known to improve the patient experience. You can go to the next slide. But the most important element here is being able to show real success. So when the patient sees that over the past 3 months, their pain level has potentially gone down, or they've been able to unlock 4 of their achievements that they've set for themselves, their treatment expectations and the reality start to merge, and you see more satisfied and excited customers or patients. You also have, in this world of opioid concerns, a really easy way to be able to wean out who are the drug seekers potentially versus the patients that really need some extra help. Those that are going through the app and are trying the different solutions and are engaging with others and are not creating enormous burden back on your practice, you can automatically loop them into one bucket. Can you go to the next slide? You also have this data that is shareable on all of your social channels about the success that your patients have seen. So you're being able to say, my patients have 80% of my patients have been able to achieve functional accomplishments during their time in my care, or our average pain score, our average Ouchie score is 5 points better than our competition or than the baseline on Ouchie. And so we give you all of this insight and data that's easily shareable and publishable to spread the message of what your patients are actually doing and the value that they're seeing. Next slide. The last part about this is another proactive approach, and that's becoming a thought leader and a trusted resource within your patient group and within the larger pain community. It kind of falls into the same bucket of having a great profile image or attending conferences. The idea that you're seen as a reputable source. And so you can create a Ouchie profile on our account, and any sort of resources that you see, maybe it's a stretch that you recommend to your patients, creating that on here, shared, and it gives the opportunity to be able to be seen in a really positive light and seen not just by your patients, but by any patient in your geographic area. Next slide. David? Okay. So to wrap up the side, sorry about that. To wrap up on our side of the webinar, really what our platform allows you to do, and what technology in general allows you to do, is to create the story about your practice and your type of care that you want to be communicated, and then use actual patient results to help amplify that message. And then it also gives you the opportunity to engage patients and create the type of practice that you want without additional burden or frustration on the point of view and your office staff. And when patients see these successes and these micro accomplishments, as we've seen, they're more likely to share the individual milestones and be less focused on the end goal.
Yeah, and just from perspective, the online reputation that you cultivate directly influences the new patients that you're attracting. Patients are very, they may be ignorant about the star ratings as a proxy for health, for quality of care, but they are pretty discerning. And so it's within your power as a provider to take action to increase the amount of reviews that you're getting and to deal with the bias head on with these types of technologies like Ouchie, which is giving chronic patients a way that they can see their progress and to prevent things from spiraling down in a negative way. If they get frustrated and discouraged and they aren't seeing a lot of progress, that can lead to a kind of a downward spiral. So that's pretty much what we wanted to say. I would like to open up the questions to people here. On your right-hand side of your screen, there should be a question tab there, and just type in the messages there. Some people also shared some questions with me earlier when they registered, so I'll turn to those if we have no questions here. The first one is from Mary. And she says, for surgeons, at what point during a patient's care would you recommend asking for feedback reviews? Would this be post-procedure during the routine follow-up appointment? From our experience, we've had several, sometimes the results are immediate, sometimes it's a little bit longer. I kind of think it's a judgment call. Clearly, if someone has a bad experience or is not progressing well, that's probably one you wouldn't want to actively solicit for a review. But you will get reviews whether you solicit them or not. So that's the one thing you have to be on guard for. But in general, yeah, use your discretion. And there's a moment when they feel that they've made a lot of progress and they've done well. And that's the time to just ask them for some feedback. And there's also just one other thing I'd like to mention on here. It's a way to say, hey, if you had a good experience, would you mind sharing that experience with others, as opposed to asking for a review? And yeah, and just to finish the thought, so it changes it from a hey, do something for me to hey, let's do something for other people by sharing your experience and bringing those people in so they'll get the care that they need. How you frame it and how you position it can make it less squeamish. Some doctors just really don't like to do this. But if you ask it the right way, you can actually turn it into something very favorable for a patient. I'm sorry, you had another point, Rachel?
I'm going to say with surgical patients, what we've seen too is introducing the concept, whether it's Ouchie or something else, before the procedure. And when you're setting like initial expectations and you have the baseline of where their challenge is, and then during a follow-up appointment, looking back at the progress that they've seen so far, and when they've been able to see the difference between then and now, to be able to point out like, wow, what do you think was the differentiating factor, or how does that make you feel, or what are you most proud of during that period of time, and then asking them to share that story.
Exactly. Here's another question from Steve. Have you seen any issues when soliciting the potentially better reviews from patients who visibly had a good experience and problems with Google? My business listing and problem. Okay, yeah. So I think what you're talking about there is There is a trend among review publishers to try to dissuade people from gating reviews. And you go to the extreme. Yelp has a policy of thou shalt not solicit a review. Let them happen naturally and everyone's okay. Google and a few other people about a little over a year ago forced a lot of review management companies to change their policy and to not ask people, don't gate it by first asking for, hey, was it a good experience or not? And that comes down to software. If the software is designed to filter out people who had a bad experience, then that's a technical violation. Here, by asking for feedback, you would never ask someone who is going to share negative feedback. You're not going to ask them for a review there. And you're not asking for a good review either. You're just asking for sharing your online feedback and experience. But I would argue it's well within your rights to be able to solicit feedback from all of your patients. You should do that as a responsible business owner. The online part of it, most people, like I said in that earlier slide, if they're a net promoter of a 1 or a 2, they're probably going to go out of their way to leave a bad review online anyway. So asking them for feedback up front helps diffuse that situation. And technologies like Ouchie give them an outlet so that they don't spiral down to that dark place where they feel they're not getting anywhere and they're not making any progress. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Steve, but it's the review gating thing is basically it's a software issue. And I don't think it's within a review publisher's right to tell you how to run your own business. Okay. So there's a question that was written by Edgar, and this is a registration. It's what about personally identifiable health information and reviews? Could you talk a little bit about that? And the issue I think there is one of HIPAA privacy. Certainly, if you're responding to a review, you want to be as careful as possible not to introduce facts that are not in evidence. So you don't want to talk about a specific person's case. You don't want to refute them, and you certainly don't want to get into an argument with someone online. The best practice is to validate their concerns and ask them to call the office to discuss those things with you, but not to get too much detail about that. Patients who divulge their own personal information online, as I understand it, that by doing that, they are waiving their own HIPAA privacy. But that doesn't entitle you then to go deeper and to talk about the specifics of their case. Rachel, I had a question for you. You mentioned before that Ouchie is a reimbursable solution. Could you explain a little bit more about what that means? Because I thought it was just a free downloadable app.
Yeah, so actually Ouchie it's a free app for patients, but when you use the clinical experience and get access to our dashboard, if your patients use it and you introduce it, it falls under remote patient monitoring and patient engagement. And so you can bill up to $123 per patient per month for Medicare patients using the app. And if you use extended care codes, so 99358 and 59, you can charge for non-face-to-face review of the data that we provide.
It sounds very interesting. There's another question here. Let's see here. Does Ouchie give angry patients a forum to vent? Isn't that making things worse?
So what we've actually found is that the environment that we create on the platform actually shapes the conversations that exist. So rather than just saying, share your experience with your healthcare provider, all of our users are responding to cognitive behavioral therapy prompts that we ask. So what are you most proud of today? What's been your biggest accomplishment? What's one thing that you were able to do today that you couldn't do yesterday? And all of that framing of dialogue not only creates an environment of support and solutions, but also has hampered a lot of negative conversation, other than like, I'm just having a bad day, and then other patients cheer them on. We also have done a lot on our back end in terms of structuring for flagging, tagging, and preventing any sort of hateful conversation.
Excellent. Yeah, and I know a lot of review publishers are they are monitoring those things, and there is they do take responsibility for some of the most egregious content that gets published. If things are published, they will also respond pretty in a responsible way. This is a question on registration from Marat, and he asks, "What is?" Well, I'm going to paraphrase it, but can you describe a little bit about what is Google My Business? How much does it cost? Marat, the Google My Business is a free product. It's probably the most essential thing you can do to manage your online reputation, since Google is such a prominent publisher of online reviews. If you go to business.google.com, they go through a review authentication and certification process just to match your online identity, phone number, and you. So problems arise when there's multiple Google My Businesses for you, or when the addresses are different, when businesses change ownership, phone numbers change, or the phone number that Google has is no longer in your possession. And that's where theoretically it's free, but then the sorting out some of the real life issues is where we make our money, and we can help with a lot of those kind of corner cases that where you might have. We had one client that had 5 different Google My Business listings, and we worked. It took about 4 months to corral them and to put them into one. And then the idea is to make it look terrific. And again, it's if you have the time to be able to add photos, to be able to add details about your background, to be adding a post once or twice a month of new information. But it's a free platform, and it's valuable, especially when people are searching for you by name. And this goes into the idea that if people are searching for a pain management doctor in New York, that they're not necessarily checking out a specific doctor. They're just trying to find help. But if they're Googling a specific doctor, Dr. Joe Smith, then they are checking his online reputation. They are looking for him. That's the 3 out of 4 that they're about to call. And they want to make sure that everything that they see online matches their expectations. Maybe they got a word of mouth. So everything has to look really good. And when it does look good, then they call. So part of that what I call branded search, or your name is a brand name, Google My Business is an essential part of that. How many review stars do you have? How complete is it? Is it a current photo? And that whole checklist. If it's very credible, it reinforces their good expectation, and they're more likely to call you. If it looks terrible, if it's confusing, if they don't see much on the first page for a Google search by your name, they might not call. And that's a word of mouth referral you should have gotten, but did not. So that's why Google My Business it's a great service. It's free, but you need to, if you have problems, it's better to sort it out with a professional. Okay, I don't see any more questions here, so why don't we use this as an opportunity to say thank you again. If you'd like any more information about Ouchie, you can go to the web. It's ouchie.com. And you can also download the app from the iTunes, and it's an Android too, right, Rachel?
The App Store and Google Play, and works on tablets and smartphones.
Excellent. And if you'd like some more information about SRL Group and how we can help online reputation, send me an email to david@srlgroup.co. That's .co, not com. And we'll try to help you out as best we can. That concludes the webinar. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you in about a month.